Bienvenidos to all our wonderful women attendees, and welcome to the Women's Forum, showing up with resilience, grit, and power. Here to kick us off, please welcome Nelly Borrero, High-Tech Board Member and Managing Director, Senior Global I&D and Client Market Lead for Accenture.
From Accenture, and happy to be here today with all of you. Thank you. Thank you for choosing to spend this time with us today. I tell you that I love these events for high tech. It's one of my favorite events to do throughout the year. And speaking of the year, what year has been? I remember doing this event in March of last year. And I remember it was our first virtual event. We had just gone down on lockdown from the pandemic. And as I think about the journey we've all been through, I think about what we've experienced. Some of us, a lot of change. Some of us have experienced challenges. Some have experienced joy, loss, sadness, fear, and hope. And I think about all these things that we've gone through together in some cases as we've connected with one another. As we were planning for this session, about, I would say 2 months ago, Karina Cardoso and I sat down, who is an incredible leader, some of you know, as well here at Accenture. And we were thinking about what should our theme be for this year in partnership with high tech? What should we be talking about? What's really relevant to what we've gone through as a community, what we've gone through as people in this last year? And three words kept showing up for us as we were talking. One was resilience, the other one was grit, and the other one was power. And as we started thinking about those three words, we started thinking about, so how do we bring this to life? How do we have people recognize their own resilience, their own grit, and their own power? So we came up with the theme, which is showing up with resilience, grit, and power. So as I was preparing a couple of weeks ago for this session, I started thinking about those three words and how I apply them in my daily life. And as I started thinking about them, I said, well, what do they really, really mean? Because, we use words constantly. We become so accustomed to making it part of our narrative. But then do we really pause and think about what do they really mean? So I looked up each word and I want to read to you the definition because I was like, oh, I like this, right? Resilience, the definition that I loved was the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. I think we can all agree that this year we've had to recover quickly from lots of difficulties. The second one, grit, courage to resolve, the strength of character. So when I think about courage to resolve, how many things we've had to resolve that we never expected to have to resolve 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And then the last one, power, the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behavior of others or the course of events. Now that's powerful. So when I started thinking about these, and I've been thinking a lot about my own journey, as I'm in the middle of writing my book finally after so many years and getting through that process and remembering things that some get me angry, some make me happy, and some make me sad. It depends on, what I'm thinking about in the moment. But what I understand about power very clearly right at this moment is that there were times in my journey that I did not recognize nor leverage my power. And if there's one thing I want to change for people is to have them take that moment of pause, no matter where they are in their journey, what level they represent today, or whatever is happening in your life. Are you clear and have you embraced the power that you have? Because I can tell you, I have missed many moments. And then I asked myself, so why did I miss so many moments? I've missed moments because I've been so laser focused on delivering. I am a doer. I'm a type A personality. My daughter refers to me as a tornado of love. I go and I just swirl around everything and get everything done and have everybody just catch up with me, right? In that process, while it has worked for me throughout my career and also personally, I also have begun to really think about what opportunities have I missed in being so rushed all of the time? And how do I take time to really pause and think about, is this really working for me? Am I okay? So as we think about these three words, I want us collectively as a group here today to agree on a couple of things. I want us to agree to be present in the moment. This is a moment that you chose to spend with us virtually. I cannot wait till we're back in person. Like I really cannot wait. But I'm not gonna lie, I haven't missed being in a hotel and an airplane every week. So there have been some moments of yay, I'm home. Um, but I want us to agree to be present virtually. I want us to think about how do we capture those very insightful nuggets that we're about to hear from these three fabulous women that are joining us today. And I'll get into these intros shortly. And I want us to continue to commit to ongoing excellence. And I say that with a lot of intention. And I say that with intention because a lot of times we do not pause to recognize how excellent we really are. And this word is a word that, I've been paying a lot of attention to probably for the last several years, but it continues to gain momentum in my language and in my own narrative. And this started several years ago, and I'll mention her name again. Carolina had done a project, and I said, this was really good. And she said, oh, no, 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 it was excellent. And I'm thinking, okay, you do you, you're excellent. But then I really started thinking about this. I'm like, she's absolutely right. This is excellent. Call it what it is. So as we think about ourselves and the journey we've been on, not only the last year, but our journey overall in our lives, is let's start to really reference ourselves as excellent, because we would not be here today as a collective group if we were not showing up with excellence every single day. So I now have the pleasure to transition and talk about these fabulous women. So I will start with Lupe Sowinski. She's a program director at JP Morgan Chase & Co. And we were on a prep call and we started really digging into the power of various words, the power of how we flip the script to how we talk about our community. How do we move away from thinking about all the challenges we have, which we know we both need to address, right, with all of you, but how do we flip that to all the positive energy and value we bring every single day while still recognizing the things that we have to address and work on? So our conversation flowed in such a natural way of understanding our responsibility here today. And that is to make sure that we are solving for all of you and that we're lifting each of you as we're talking here today. So then I go to Jamie Maldonado. She's a managing director at Accenture. And I will tell you, I've seen her journey, right? We both at Accenture, so I've seen her from very junior in her career. And I never forget a moment that we had in DC. We were attending another event. And it was the first time I really had an opportunity to sit down and really pause and experience the moment with Jamie. And as she was talking about her role and what she was doing at Accenture, in me, I'm thinking, wow, that's really impressive. Wow, that's amazing. Wow, she's incredible. I'm going through all these different things. Then I remember walking away, and the way I end my day every day is I end it in a moment of reflection. And I reflected on the day, and I had one regret about that day. And my regret was that as Jamie was sharing all of this, I didn't pause to say, you're excellent. What an amazing, amazing career you've had, right? But I knew that I would make up for that in other ways, right? I knew I would advocate for her. I knew that I would be, one to really talk about her when she was not in the room and be that sponsor and that mentor, which we all have to do for people. So Jamie, I congratulate you on your amazing journey at Accenture. And now it leaves me with Myrna Soto. Okay, so let me just say, I met Myrna, I think it might have been 10 years ago, Myrna, I don't know, time flies. And I remember meeting her at a high-tech event. And in that moment, I understood two things: the power of high-tech and the power of Myrna. Clear as day. I mean, her brand is a brand that shows up with intensity, but it shows up with intensity, with incredible intention to continue to lift the Latinx community. She's done it in an incredible way. She sits on so many boards. She's currently the Chief Strategy and Trust leader at ForcePoint. Every time Myrna gets selected for a board, I do my own celebration. I was with her an event where she was ranked the #1 Latina. And I remember her going up on stage. And I remember in a very selfish way, I wanted to be the first person when she walked off that stage to give her a hug. So I parked myself by the steps to give her a hug because it was going to be me to recognize the power of this woman. So it's been an incredible journey she and I've had together. We call each other when we're going through turmoil. We seek each other's counsel and support because one thing we know for sure is that we will be very direct with one another, no matter whether we want to hear it or not. And that's the power of having someone to help you along your journey. So now you're getting a sense of what we're diving into. We're diving into an incredibly powerful conversation. This is why I said be present. So we're diving in. We're going to start with a question that I'm going to ask each of our panelists. And then I'm going to ask specific questions along the way. So the question I'm going to start with is, what does showing up with resilience, grit, and power mean to you? And I'm going to start with Myrna.
Well, first of all, Nelly, thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to tell you that was excellent. And you by far are excellent. Thank you so much, my friend, for celebrating me the way that I have always been very grateful for. And of course, when I found out you were doing this, I was very grateful to join you and the other ladies. So thank you. So what does it mean to show up? I think about the definition of each of the words that you reviewed, and it is in its purest sense what I believe in about showing up. When we talk about being influential, and in particular, being influential sometimes without direct authority or direct power, I think is extremely important for all of us to understand how we serve in that mode. Being resilient and being able to come up from difficulties. I think every single person on this panel and probably every single person listening to us right now has had that moment of resilience, and in particular this last year, as you mentioned earlier. But I think, one of the things that I've been talking about recently to great detail, and I have the blessing to be able to do so in certain platforms, is about being authentic. I had a recent event that I participated in, and they asked me about my authenticity and showing up as a Latina. And I shared a number of stories, which I won't go through today, but happy to do so at another time. But shared some stories where I had the opportunity not to hide who I was and to make sure that I show up authentically and be proud of where I've come from, my background, and my heritage. So I think for this group in particular, because we're here with the high tech group and with the Women's Forum, it's really about being authentic, showing up as you are, knowing what your value is, and being influential even when you don't have direct power or authority.
That's great, Myrna. So those words, influential and authentic, I think we can all say, yes, do we show up that way every day? And if we don't, how do we change that, right? So thank you for sharing that. So Lupe, I'm going to go over to you next. What does it mean to you?
Wow. Just want to say thank you, though, first, Nelly. Thank you very much. And Myrna and Jamie, really proud to be here on this panel with both of you ladies. I was actually going to give a little emoji heart because it sounded like Nelly was giving you quite a bit of love. I think authenticity is super important. And quite frankly, the fact that you're lifting up on this call and for everybody in the audience, that to me is being authentic and also resilient. Without having great sponsorship in your life, whether it's personally, professionally, frankly, with your family, it would be very difficult for those of us to express how resilient we can be. I also think, just reflecting on your definition of grit and the courage and what that actually conveys, you actually made me pause, because I think this year, including all of last year, I think all of us have demonstrated coming into the day with courage. We don't know what we're carrying with us just entering into our day. I hope that we all lean on one another a bit more. I know I can with my family at work. I also have quite a bit of sponsorship at JP Morgan as well that helps me get through my day. So I would say resiliency and grit are probably my superpower and how I start my day with those of you that are around me, helping me get through life. I think it's been a tough year, And we all have people that work for us or that we work with, that perhaps we don't see who and what they are actually dealing with, to make sure that they bring themselves. And I leave you with this comment: commitment to excellence and being intentional about it. I think because of the environment we're in today, we have to demonstrate that just often and regularly, so that it's more of a behavior, less of a, oh, I better do that in this moment, more about doing it all day long.
That is excellent because it is true, right? And when I think about, the words that you use, Lupe, you used one word that it happens to be my favorite word, and it's a word that I think about all day long, and that is courage. How to show up with courage, because if we do not show up that way, we really miss the opportunity to solve for others and for ourselves, and for the brands we represent, right? So I love that word. Jamie, I know it's not easy going third, after hearing these two incredible women, but you're authentic and have your own narrative. So what does it mean to show up for you?
Thank you so much, Nellie. And thanks for that introduction. I think I got a little emotional from it. So I am thankful to you and for that excellent intro that you gave us. And great to be on this panel with all of you today. I think the way I would follow that is to say, it has not always been easy for me to show up with resilience, grit, and power. This past year, I was up for a big promotion, and there were many, many times in which I doubted myself. And I did a little exercise called my journey line through my life and through my career. And it helped me see that I had peaks and valleys throughout my career. And it helped me see right there on the page that I do have resilience, grit, and power. And there are so many times in which I forget it and in which I question myself. And there's that little voice in the back of your head that says, what are you doing in this room? What are you doing in this panel? And I was reminded, thanks to that little bit of a pause, as you mentioned earlier, right? Not just driving at the next thing, but that pause, that I truly do have it, and that I've experienced it and shown it over and over again in my life, as I'm sure we all have who are joining this call.
And that's critically important what you shared, right, Jamie, because it is about, you had the doubt, right? The doubt, that's that negative inner voice that shows up all the time. So you had that doubt. You took a step to kind of shut that negative inner voice down by taking a look at your journey and where you've shown up with resilience. It's almost like a reminder, a confirmation, an affirmation of what you've been able to accomplish. So thank you for sharing that, because I think many of us, and I tell people, it doesn't matter how high you are in an organization, at what level, you're constantly negotiating with that inner voice. It's a constant negotiation. So thank you for that. Thank you, all three of you. Lupe, I'm going to go over to you. In what ways have you observed women, especially Latinas, embrace their power and influence? What have you witnessed? What has stood out for you?
Wow. Well, right now, how's that? Everybody on this call, embracing the power. I think Latina women have, and men, so I don't want to exclude the men in the group, we have the ability to come into our own when we're surrounded by people that look like us or are most familiar. We're challenged, though, quite frankly, when we don't feel that in the room. So where I've seen it work successfully is when we are the only ones present in the room, and we acknowledge that perhaps there's other biases going on in the conversation, and we're able to lift the conversation to a different level to ensure that there's inclusion. I think Latina women are even more, I would say, keen at searching that out, because we are often the only ones in the room. And because of that, we highly empathize when we see that happening. So I encourage all of us listening to continue to be mindful, especially when you're challenged, and influence your own inner voice, because you're right, we're all challenged with that, but think of it with positive intent.
And I really like the way you say influence your own inner voice, because we talk about how it gets very negative and we have to sort of work at it getting positive. But it's the first time I hear the term influence your inner voice. So I think we all need to walk away with that as well. That's really, really great. So Myrna, I'm going to go over to you. And I know this is really important to you because you live this every day and how we solve for this. So let me read the question. It's no surprise that there's not equal representation of Latinx leaders in the tech industry. Women are still underrepresented. Even more, our women of color at the pandemic is increasing this problem. So we're seeing a rise in the challenge. How can we help reverse this trend?
So first and foremost, you're absolutely right. I've been living this for, I'm not even going to say the number of years because I'm going to date myself if I do that. But it's certainly a significant issue, a significant challenge. It's still fairly pervasive. And what's amazing to me is the number of women of color, who are in the field, who have studied, who have, cut their teeth on the technology spectrum and still are not being given the opportunity to rise to these accelerated levels. One thing that I think that we need to do, and we may hear some themes repeated over and over, is our ability to influence. It's one of the things that I believe I have a very great responsibility to do. I have been given the opportunity to hold C-level positions in a number of technology fields. You mentioned being ranked #1 of the most powerful Latinas, probably only the one in technology at the time, and to use that platform to make sure that those of us that are behind us generationally and or in their career paths see us in these roles. And it doesn't have to be technology, it's any type of senior leadership role. I often say, if you could see it, you can be it. And that's now one of the things that I use just about every time I have a chance to make sure that folks understand if I can do it. And if you know my background, which was not in technology to begin with, then you can do it. I'm also spending a lot of time, and I'm asking other colleagues of mine to do the same, is to ask the hard questions. When there's only one in the room or none in the room, why are we not asking the question and say, hey, how come we don't have? Why are we not providing other opportunities? And most importantly, when an opportunity does open up, we need to be very deliberate and intentional. And yes, I'm going to say something some people aren't comfortable with. Force the agenda to make sure that women and women of color are interviewed for these positions. We always want to be the most qualified candidate for a role, but we have to be given the shot to be able to express our value and what we have in our experience to provide to whatever that role may be. Mm-hmm. Lastly, and I am, again, take huge responsibility for this. I'm spending a considerable amount of time in the boardroom of the companies that I serve as a board member on to make sure that succession planning includes the appropriate amount of diversity and that we don't always look at succession in an absolute fashion. It doesn't always have to be perfect experience. We need to look at the person on their whole value and what experiences they bring to the table and what we can do to shape their skills for the position at hand. That was a long answer, but I wanted to make sure that I use words like intentional, drive the agenda, and ask the tough questions, because that's what we all need to do.
And that is spot on. And that comes also with showcasing the courage that you showcase in these rooms, because, it's easy for people to hear what you're saying, right? But to understand all of the anxiety sometimes that comes along with this, understanding the political correctness you have to navigate through to do that, all these things that you have to take risk to actually position some of these actions. So I want to reinforce two very specific things that you said. And that is, number one, is we have to use our platforms. The way you outlined how you're using your platforms is exactly what I want to make sure we all continue to do, right? Because it's great to get all this acknowledgement and awards and accolades, but how are we now leveraging that, right? And the second thing around that is that I want to reinforce is ask those questions. Ask those questions even when you feel it is sometimes risky and you need courage, but we have to advocate for one another. So that was great. Thank you.
Nelly, if I can make one other comment, I promise you. When we say platforms, do not discount what that means. A platform does not have to be a grand stage. A platform can be an association, it could be a consortium, it could even be your network. So don't misinterpret platform with formality. It's amazing what will happen when we use our circles and our platforms to push the agenda.
Yeah. Key add-on. Thank you, Myrna, because that is true, right? Is all of us holistically. How do we navigate through that? Thank you for that. All right, Jamie, I'm going to go over to you. What are key learnings along your journey that have helped you or held you back?
Yeah, this is a fun one. I feel like there's two sides to this. There's the professional side to this answer, and then there's the personal and home answer to this question, right? So on the professional side, I want to say that my key learnings have been, I think you just heard about believing in myself. I think that's a key learning, right? And I think we've all heard about the importance of having that board of directors, having the mentors, having the sponsors, having the coaches, and knowing the difference between all of them and the roles that they play. I think I've also learned taking a risk. There's been times in which I've been tapped on the shoulder to take on this big role or this big responsibility. And I'm looking around like, okay, are you sure you want me to do that? And then I jump in, right? And through perseverance, the grit, the dedication, and my power, right? And the team, we make it through and we're successful. I think I've learned, right, that it takes a village at work and at home. I'll get to the home part in a moment. But at work, I really learned to network effectively to help me, right? To help me, the people that are going to be my advocates and that make me feel good and that remind me of that power. And then the people that help me see sort of my blind spots and the people that are honestly pulling me up and helping me get into that right position, get into the right opportunities so that I can shine and I can show that I can do this, right? That's on the professional side. And there's a lot more there I'm happy to unpack. On the personal side, and I think this has been really important for me, it takes a village as well, right? I am a Latina. I come from a family, like we're super close. I have a little one. I'm in consulting. And the way I've made it all work is by having a village. It does take a village and having that support network at home. I'm going to tell you a story about my husband and I. One time that we were not seeing eye to eye, and this was a game changer for me. I had been feeling run down. There were a lot of things to do at the house, so many things. And I sat him down and I said, we're going to do this little exercise. I took a piece of paper, drew a line down the middle of it. On one side, I put everything that I was doing for the household. Here's everything I'm doing. It went to the other side of the page. And then on the right-hand side, I said, let's put everything you're doing for the household. And it went not even to the halfway point of that first page. And I was like, something needs to change. And it doesn't have to be that you have to take everything. We might outsource some of these things. We might, find other creative ways to do these things, but this is not working. And it's just not working for me. It's not sustainable. And that was a life changer for me personally, because we're partners in this and we're in this together. And he is incredibly supportive of my career and he's incredibly supportive of my dreams, as I am of his. And we want this little, family unit of ours to be successful, and it takes both of us to do that.
I'm so glad you shared that. I'm glad you shared two things, right? The believe in yourself, because it's a line that we should all think about every single day. Because we doubt ourselves and we have doubters. So we have to address those every day. But that exercise of transparency and a conversation to say, let's take a look at, how we're dividing. And then that other point that you made doesn't mean you have to take half of it. Let's make decisions on how we outsource some of this, right? That is not easy for us. I remember going through that with my husband years ago and feeling like we had to do everything, the cooking, the cleaning, the this, everything. And we just were not raised to really think about how to hire people to help us do things, how to, take money out of, the budget that we had and think about is it better spent giving us time? Or is it better spent us, all day long cleaning on a Saturday? I mean, so all these things are really important to share. So thank you, because I think that's very powerful for people to hear. So I know that I have other questions, but I kind of want to give Myrna and Lupe an opportunity to react to what you said, because I think, as you were talking, I'm looking at them, right? And I see their heads going, I see them smiling. And I'm like, you know what? I think this is one that we should definitely get the perspective of the two of them as well. So Myrna, I'll go to you, then I'll go to Lupe.
So first of all, I love the way her consulting background came into play. Let's sit down, have an exercise. Let's go through this process. I absolutely love it. But I mean, the exercise and what you shared, the story that you shared is so groundbreaking for so many of us to consider. And I say that because, our ability to be successful, a lot of people talk about, especially for women, work-life balance. I don't really talk about work-life balance. I talk about work-life choices, right? We could do anything and everything that we want. We just can't do it all at the same time. But our success is also indicative of our support network, our spouse, our family, the network. And I couldn't help but smile when you said, I'm Latina. I got a pretty large, close family. I'm like, I'm surprised. No, I'm just kidding. But the reality is that all of those elements is what make each of us unique in the fact that we come from a very particular background. Our upbringing is to be humble. So we need to kind of change that a little bit, right? And to be able to celebrate our successes, but it's also not to ask for help. And what Nelly just, she said, we need to make the choice to say, where is this best spent? Is it best spent giving us more time? And oh, by the way, supporting somebody else that's providing a service. Think about that. But I love your story. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you, Myrna. Lupe, your reaction?
Oh, I'm just chuckling, Jamie, because I completely understand where you're coming from, and I'm sure others who are listening do as well. I also want to suggest that I remember having a moment like that, with myself, and then bringing the family to the kitchen table and saying something has to give, right? There was a sponsor I had who basically pointed something out to me, and I really, really appreciate it. So I thought I'd add that here. Super important not to segment our lives so much. This is work, here's family, here's me, here's sister, here's mother, here's aunt. It's just impossible because of the culture we come from. And so we have to embrace that. And this came from an advisor who's not Latin, everyone. So rather than fight that contention, it was, for me at least, it felt really good to think of it as like teams. So, Team Sowinski family, team insert name. For me, I have a daughter who's on the spectrum. So Team Elena. And then I had Team Lupe, who is that? And how complex, you can make it, or how simple you can make it, but it helps you think through those moments when you're crashing and you feel it and you have to have a kitchen table meeting of the minds, right? So I completely appreciate what you said, Jamie. And I know how important it was for me to kind of look at it a different way, actually embrace it and not feel so victimized by it. But thank you for sharing, because that's being comfortable in your vulnerability, and it's so difficult for us to feel that way.
Lupe, I'm over here smiling because those high techers that are out there that have known me for quite some time know that there is a saying in my household, and it starts with the word team, but we'll leave the details for some other time.
I know exactly what you're referencing. Thank you for that, Lupe, Myrna, and Jamie. I mean, it was just really important to sort of pause in this moment and really talk about this. And Lupe, that was great mentoring and advice that you got from your leader, and thank you for sharing it. Lupe, I'm going to stick with, actually, no, I'm going to go to Myrna, and I'm going to come back to you, Lupe, really quickly. But Myrna, I want to get into barriers. Right. And we throw this word around so often, we know they exist. So I want to get into a question with you around this. And that is, breaking barriers has both the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity for Latinas. What are some of the challenges you have faced as a Latina and still continue to see to this day?
It pains me to answer this question. So some of the challenges that I have seen throughout my career, one in particular early in my career, and I've witnessed most of us doing it today, is I got feedback early in my career that I needed to stop talking with my hands, that I needed to stop, doing this. And that I also got feedback regarding my tone and tenor when I was passionate about a particular topic. And people misunderstanding that, let's be honest, we've all had the experience where people say, why are you guys fighting? No, we're not fighting. We are actually being very passionate about how we're expressing ourselves. And this is our cultural way of generating energy. That continues to be a problem today. I have actually heard people, even in this day and age, say things like, well, they're going to be a little boisterous in meetings, or they're going to, and it just drives me bananas. But one of the things that I have seen, modify some of these barriers is the tremendous work. And I'm going to give my friend Nellie a ton of credit here for the work that she does at Accenture and what she does in her personal life around inclusion and diversity, and how many organizations have been raising awareness around the importance of inclusion and diversity, and are trying to demystify some of those stereotypes and unconscious biases. But unfortunately, when I was coming through in my career, those unconscious biases were very pervasive, and having to kind of, hurdle them in a way with very, very tactful, politically correct statementing about being accepted, getting a seat at the table, things of that nature were difficult. And then I know that I could tell stories all day long about them, but probably one of the most incredible stories that I can share, and I'm going to abbreviate it, is in one of my early leadership positions when I decided, because I'm a decent human being, to have a conversation with the crew that was cleaning the office that I was in. They happened to be Hispanic, so I spoke to them in Spanish. And I had 3 of my colleagues literally get whiplash and turn their neck and say, "You speak Spanish? Oh, I didn't know you were Spanish. You don't look Spanish." And I said, "What does that look like? What does that mean? What does that mean? Because I've got an uncle with blue eyes and blonde hair. I've got an aunt that's very dark." And I went down the whole list, and they were just, they didn't even know how to respond. And that was probably back in 1987. Oh my God, I did it. I dated myself. But in 1987, there was that moment of truth to make sure people understood, how dare you? How dare you make those assumptions? And how dare you kind of put us in a box? But definitely those hurdles still exist. They're much less now than they were before. But I think when we show up and we deliver, when we show up and demonstrate our value, many of those hurdles start to fade away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that you share that story, Myrna, right? Because when you think about those biases and how we do have to hurdle them, how we have to navigate through them, the PC thing that you mentioned, and when there's a discovery, right? You had the thing of, oh, they didn't know you were Latina. I had a comment made to me one time that we were in a room and I was always the only Latina in the room, and it was all these big meetings. It was years, decades ago. I could say decades with you, Myrna. Okay, so we're dating ourselves. And I remember I raised an issue about women of color, and someone said to me, "Oh, I keep forgetting you're a minority." And the thing is that individual felt it was a compliment. So I had to spend a good 15 minutes educating everyone as to how incredibly inappropriate and hurtful and insulting that comment was, right? So it's the opportunity to educate, like you had to do. We've all had to educate. So I'm going to transition to Lupe, because I'm sure you have lots of stories as well, Lupe, but I want to focus on, we go through these journeys. We have to hurdle these biases, as Myrna says. What has kept you from giving up in your journey? Have there been those moments?
Wow. Yeah, I was going to answer it a certain way, but I'm just reflecting on everything I'm hearing these ladies say. So really giving up, it's just not an option. And I think we're all here with our own personal journeys to reflect on why it's not. But even just listening to all of you, it's just not an option for me, right? It's not an option for me also to not give up, rather show up because of who brought me here. And so I would say my parents, for sure, that's why I show up and don't give up. my daughters, I have three, my sisters, my brothers, my colleagues that are here on the call today, my friends, the list goes on and on. But the one person I would say is my father, who came here with nothing at the age of 21 by himself. He's now passed, but he was my biggest cheerleader. And just values he taught me was about what we would say be your authentic self today, but I would say, he would say what you mean what you say. If you say you're going to do it, do it. But do it with love, do it with humility, do it with integrity, do it with a sense of responsibility. You're always here to educate, and you're always here to be educated. So honestly, it's the people that came before me, the ladies that are here on the call, my colleagues who are on this discussion with all of us. That's what really keeps me going. Yes, I have self-doubts. That happens all the time. I think all of you have said the same. But finding who my team Lupe is was really important for me. That was a critical path for me. And so I often lean on them to help me in those moments when I am in doubt. But yeah, it's just who we are.
Yeah. So Lupe, two things. I mean, you use the line that I use all the time. Giving up is not an option. We don't have that luxury. We don't have that luxury to give up, not for ourselves, for our children, for our communities. We just don't have it. And you touched on, and thank you for sharing the story about your dad, right? I can relate to that so well. Mine has passed since as well. And it was just such a educator in so many ways. And when we think about the journey of our ancestors, whether they're parents, aunts, uncles, great grandparents, grandparents, whatever the case is, if we think about their journey and what they did with that journey, and how they were able to position us in a way to continue to rise, I mean, it's just quite incredible. And if we think about the words for today, resilience, grit, I mean, I can't think of any other generation that's had more of that, right? And has helped instill that in us, into our DNA. So that again was a moment, Lupe, right, where we touched on something that is personal. So I don't want to bypass it without giving Myrna and Jamie an opportunity to sort of share in that space, because we have a lot of gratitude, I know, for people that have helped propel us. So I'm going to go to you, Myrna, then I'll go to Jamie on this.
Sure, thank you. So I was smiling when Lupe spoke about her father. I think that I can equally share in the fact I still have my father with me today, thank goodness. And he was also one of my biggest cheerleaders. And what I've often shared with a number of young ladies that I mentor, when they're faced with these career decisions, having to take risks, and one of the biggest risks that we take as a community from our background is leaving. And what I mean by that is having to move away from our tight-knit family. And sometimes we may or may not have to do that for our career. And I'll never forget the time that I needed to make that decision and leave the nest. We know what that nest means in the Hispanic family. I needed to leave the nest for my career. And I'll never forget my papi looking at me and saying, go ahead. What's the worst thing that can happen? It doesn't work out, you come back home. We will be here for you. And that's all I needed to hear. That's all I needed to hear, to just take that jump. And since then, he says, my God, you've been jumping quite a bit. But the reality is that we need that type of support, and having that ability to have those type of support systems. And, you know, listen, I'm going to be biased. I'm going to say our culture has a very unique support ecosystem, right, in our heritage, that we should be very grateful for. And for all the things that Lupe mentioned about grateful for coming to this country with nothing, doing all the sacrifices. And that just equals exactly what we started this conversation. We cannot give up. Because of them, we must continue to push forward. Adelante, the push up and pull up that high tech is all about. We need to continue to do that. I'm just very inspired right now, just hearing from these ladies.
Myrna, thank you.
I'm ready to do something.
And we'll go to Jamie in a second, but I always have to touch on these things, right? Because I want to keep reinforcing. You use the word cheerleader. Your dad is your biggest cheerleader. And that resonated with me in such a personal and emotional way, because when my dad passed, I asked myself this question: who's going to be my cheerleader? Because that was who was my cheerleader throughout my entire journey, right? Go experience the world. What's the worst that can happen? All these things, and giving me that permission to sort of explore and fail if I had to, right? But here's what I want to share about this. When I asked myself that question, it took me only several weeks to say, oh, wait a minute, I have a lot of other cheerleaders. I have a lot of them, and collectively they'll make up for that one, right? So I say that because sometimes we feel the loss in such an intense way, and we have to pause and take a look at where else can we fill that gap, right? Although it's never completely filled. But thank you for sharing para adelante as well, because we need to continue to remind ourselves of that. So Jamie, over to you on this very personal topic.
So once again, how do I follow all of that, ladies? So for me, from a personal side of the house, I'll share, my mom came to this country looking for the American dream, didn't know English, right? I was 8 years old. I was her translator, and a very bad one at that. And, this is partly for her, right? We cleaned houses on the weekends. She held 3 jobs. I basically raised my little brother because she worked so incredibly hard to help us get to where we are today. So there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of that in my blood, in my veins. Like, this work, I can do this work. We've got this, right? Those that came before us had it so much different, like a lot harder in many ways, and we've got this. I also think about my mamita, who's my grandma, who practically raised me as well, and whose saying to me was, "Yo voy a ti." That was her saying to me. And she was totally my cheerleader, right there with you ladies. She was my cheerleader. And when she left, it was such an incredible gap in my life. But I think you guys are right? Like, you build this familia, and you remember them, you honor them in what you do and what you say. And last but not least, guys, I also do it for those that come behind, like those that come after us, right? We've talked about how we need to see representation where we want to get to. Mm-hmm. And I also do it for that, right? I looked around at one point, and in tech strategy, there weren't that many women, and there were no Latinas. And I was like, well, I'm going to try, right? I'm going to try. And here I am.
Jamie, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to stick with you for a minute here as well. But as we heard your story, Myrna, Lupe's story, right? I shared a little bit, I planted some seeds of mine as well. What's really important about that is that we get to meet a lot of women in a professional setting, right? We meet each other at high tech, which is like, an amazing setting. What we don't know is the stories behind what we see. We don't know, Jamie, that you cleaned houses with your mom, right? That she had 3 jobs. We don't know all of these things that we've gone through. And we have to continue to find ways to share those stories, because there are other junior women that are coming up that are trying to figure out, can I make it to managing director? Can I sit on boards? Can I be a director, right? Can I do all of these things? And we have to showcase that, yes, if we made it, yes, you can too, right? So the push up and pull up that Myrna talks about. So Jamie, I'm going to stick with you here for a minute or so. And here's the question that I want to throw your way. We are a community of great talent and growing quite rapidly. What advice would you give to junior members of our Latinx community today?
What advice would I give? I think I'd start with a little bit of where we just left off. I want you guys to set your sights high. I want you guys to aspire to those areas that you think might be unreachable, because guess what? You can make it there. You really, really can. I mean, if we're talking about resilience, grit, and power today, we have all of that in our veins. It runs through our blood, right? You can make it there. I want you guys to aspire to that. And then I also want you to think about, this is a little bit more practical, your brand, right? How am I going to build on my brand, and what are going to be those stepping stones that are going to help me get there? And then I want you to reach out into the community and build that advisory board, and those people, those cheerleaders that are going to help you get there, and that are going to help you see, okay, well, you've got these 3 things that are going to help you get there, but maybe you're missing these 2. Let me help you get that under your belt so that when you're ready, you can take that step to get there, right? And I want you to believe in yourselves. I want you to hear from all of us collectively in this panel, yo voy a ti. Like, our bet's on you. You've got this and you can make it there.
Beautiful. That is beautiful. So before we transition to questions from the audience, Myrna, I'm going to go to you, and Jamie, you as well. And that is, here's the question. What responsibility do you feel you have to further evolve our Latinx community and the next generation of Latinx leaders at work and within your communities? So Myrna, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. So a couple things. One, we touched upon it a little bit, but I want to expand upon it in responding to the question. I think the responsibilities we have is we need to share more of our stories, right? You know, I'm remiss when I share a story on one of these platforms and someone that I may know says, oh, I never knew that about, you know, I never knew that. We need to do better at sharing our stories. I also have incorporated a particular saying that I also share with my mentees is very often when I go from role to role, board, senior executive, whatever it may be, I always enter that with a very strong philosophy of leaving it better than how I found it. And that is about the next generation. And Jamie hit it right on the, you know, aim high, stretch, don't limit your possibilities. But we also need to share the stories because Jamie's story is incredibly inspirational to those that are listening from her generation and generation behind her. When I think about the first time, and I don't know why it took me so long, but I remember the first time I shared the story that my upbringing, neither one of my parents went to college. I was the first graduate in my family. First generation college graduate in my family. Grew up in a blue collar community. People say, wow, now you're serving on 3 boards. You've had all of these successes. The point is what Jamie said before, limitless with the right resilience, grit, and influence, we can accomplish anything that we want to. And some people may say, oh, that's kind of cliche. No, it's not. We can accomplish anything that we set our mind to and that we plan for and we take steps towards and that we have the right support system around us to accomplish that. So I leave you with leave it better than how you found it for the next generation. And that's asking those difficult questions, being intentional. And last but not least, let's share our stories and let's celebrate our stories because that will let those around us say, oh, wait a minute, that's me. I can do this. And if that is the greatest satisfaction I personally get from all the things I've done in my career and all the awards and recognition, the biggest satisfaction is when someone says, thank you for sharing that because that's my story. And now I feel I can do it.
That's great. Myrna, I loved how you used the line in a very assertive way just now. And I picked up the difference in inflection right away. And that was when you said, you know, it's limitless, right? You're quoting what Jamie said, you're agreeing with what Jamie said. And then you said, for some that sounds cliche, and you're like, no, it's not, right? I mean, that power right there is what I want people to experience and feel, right? And really just hold on to because that's true. No, it's not. It's how you're going to navigate this journey and how you're going to believe in yourself, right? And do all the things we're talking about. So I loved how you got very assertive in that point. I'm like, yes, Myrna, preach. Love it. All right. So over to you, Lupe, the same question, right? What responsibility do you feel you have and continue to evolve our community?
Oh my goodness. Every day I take it with great pride. At JP Morgan, I actually run our Hispanic and technology community in partnership with a really good, I would say, mentor. His name is Miguel. So if he's out in the crowd, personal thank you. Always challenging our thoughts. Myrna, what you just said, like, no, it's not. I actually took it as there's a little bit of punch in there, right? Like, take hold of yourself because it's not, and straighten yourself up. So I do quite a bit of work advising women and men who are Hispanics professionally and personally, even within the family, outside of the family, through my church associations, through other organizations I'm involved with. I think that's super important. I love the whole pull up, but I encourage everybody to think about lifting up. I think there's many, many times in our community, especially recently, where we're all troubled with what we hear about COVID, how it's impacting our community. So for all of us that are energized from this conversation, I would suggest I challenge you all, probably slightly, because I think we already do it, but to think outside of our comfort zone, go beyond, reach beyond that network, reach beyond your immediate, go-to, and see if you can influence in those other communities so that you are their encouragement.
Great. And I love how you end that, right? It's the encouragement. How do we continue to do that? And to your point at Lyft, right? I know that Myrna is saying in high tech is push up, pull up, right? And we have to also continue to think about exactly as we're pushing up, how are we lifting and how are we doing all these things. So it's all the same message. It's just how we want to wrap it, right? So thank you for that, Lupe. That's spot on. We're going to go to take questions, but before we do that, Myrna, I don't like to leave people hanging, right? So you threw out there, you teased the team thing. And I said, yeah, we'll get back to that. I don't think you realized I meant today.
Okay.
So before we start going to the questions that I know we're going to start seeing them is, can you share just briefly, right, what your sort of focus is around the teaming that you have in your life and how you set that up?
Sure. I will be revealing in personal in responding to this. So when I think of the whole concept that we were talking about, teams, the exercise that Jamie did with her husband, going back to the work-life balance / what I believe is more like work-life choices. I have said on stage many, many occasions that there is no way that I would have been able to accomplish everything that I have been able to accomplish without the support of my spouse. And my spouse and I came up with something, it must have been about 5 or 6 years ago, actually right before we got legally married. And we combined the two first letters of our last names. Mine is Soto, hers is Pascual. And we made it Team Sopa. And Sopa because what is Sopa? For us, it's a soup. It's the ingredients of all the things of just greatness that come together when you cook a soup. And that team has just propelled me beyond belief. Now, that team is just not the two of us. There are tons of people, many of which are listening to this session right now because I got a couple text messages saying, oh, I know which team you're talking about. Many people on that are listening to this session that are part of that team. And that's why we say, wow, isn't this incredible how the letters of our last names equal una sopa. And that is just, to us, that's just the most beautiful thing. And it has caught on like wildfire. Hashtag Team Sopa. You'll find it out there and you'll see some interesting things. But I'm a firm believer that teaming is the only way that we're going to be successful. Number one, we talk about push up, pull up. It's about this team pushing and pulling up those of us around us for opportunities, for that open door, for that endorsement, for that reference. And don't underestimate the informal team, your network, people that will be your sponsor that you don't even know are sponsoring you. Those are the best ones. People that speak about you when you're not in the room and support your journey. It's an incredible, powerful thing.
Thank you for sharing that, Myrna, because I'm very familiar with Team Sopa. I've benefited from Team Sopa with all the events. So thank you for that. So as we go to the questions, right, just again, as I think about how to wrap this up, we think about, Jamie's point, opportunities are limitless, right? Believe in yourself. Lupe with, continue to lift and really think about how do you continue to sort of solve for yourself and everyone around you and just have that space. And Myrna, your push up, pull up and how we continue to have to be influential and courageous, right? You and Lupe both talked about courage, which is so incredibly important. I mean, there's so much to summarize here, but I can't do that now because we're going to get to questions. Now, here's the thing with transparency, right? My eyes are not what they used to be, so I got to lean over to read these questions coming in. So bear with me as I try to adjust my eyes here. And no comments from anybody, thank you. So as one of the questions that's coming in is, the role of others is to be our CEO. Is that CEO the way we think about it? But our chief encouragement officer. So as we think of it from that perspective, they learn to be, cheerleaders. How can we assist those in our professional lives to be our chief encouragement officers, our CEOs? I think any of you could take that on, but I'm going to go to Lupe because this came from your organization, and I want your people to hear from you exactly how to make that happen. And then Myrna and Jamie, feel free to add on. So Lupe, over to you.
Sure. Well, I'm going to piggyback off Myrna. She just said we have to be more vocal, and so did you, Nellie, about who we are, where we came from, share our personal experiences, our life stories. I think we have a tendency not to do that, and now is the time to do that. I encourage everybody to do that. Once you do that, that's your first step in building a relationship. And frankly, it might open the doors to other people that just didn't even know that about yourself. I know, learned from me, it took me a long time to do that. I always thought, oh, I have to have this professional demeanor, separating the lives, personal from professional. I don't even know how to do that anymore, everybody. So I think the more personal you are, the better it will be. I literally just had a phone call where it was very clear to me the person needed encouragement, and the person actually encouraged me repeatedly over the past few years. So I knew right away he needed it, and I needed to invest in that encouragement, meaning a bit of my own brand, my own just who I am, has nothing to do with who I am at JP Morgan, who I am in my family, just who I am with integrity. How can I help him? Help him get to where he needs to be and where he wants to go. So I think the more you share, the better off we'll all be. And of course, that means we have to be comfortable in our own vulnerability. Not everybody's a superpower, great human being all day long. It takes a village. So I would suggest that we all think about that, just being a little more comfortable in ourselves and our authentic selves.
Yep, sharing those stories. Before I go to the next one, Jamie or Myrna, anything you want to add quickly to that regarding that question?
I'll just quickly underscore, Lupe. I'm totally with you. There was a time in which I thought work was here, personal was here, and there was this big wall between the two of them. And it took a lot of courage on my part to be vulnerable at work and to share some of these stories at work. I'll recommend the TED Talk, The Power of Vulnerability, for all of you out there. You need a little bit more of a push, but we all need this connection right now, right? And these are the stories, and letting people in to see who you really are and why you are the way you are is what helps us all connect.
Mm-hmm. Great. Myrna, I welcome you adding, but I'm actually going to go to this question for you. So maybe you can combine the two. This next question is, in your opinion, what is the power of mentorship for our community? How do you advise us to seek for mentorship? How do you find a mentor? That's a lot of questions in one. So again, Lupe and Jamie, feel free to add on. But Myrna, let's start with you.
Sounds good. And I'm actually watching myself in one of the gallery views. So I may appear frozen, and I am going to say I am not, just in case you see me frozen. So the power of mentoring and sponsorship, I think, is one of the things that we haven't really been able to take advantage of to its full potential for our community. I think when we think about the CEO question, sometimes people don't even realize the power they can have to be our mentors until we actually approach them and ask them for advice. And we encourage them to share and say, hey, I know that you've gone through this before. Please tell me, how did you do it? What advice would you have? And here's the reality. This is not about ego. This is not about anything other than the fact I mentioned earlier, my greatest satisfaction is learning about someone who hears a story and is able to be inspired by it. You know, don't be afraid. People want you to be successful. I think there's this strange perception that people don't want to help, or they're too busy, or this, that, and the other. I think that when we give people the respect and acknowledge their accomplishments, they immediately are open to saying, hey, here's what I did, here's how I can help you. But I think that sponsorship and mentorship is an extremely powerful, and I have to give kudos to high tech because we're all about that. You know, we have our emerging executives program where we do the mentor assignments, and we have a ton of informal mentoring opportunities. But I would also encourage us to seek mentors outside of our community as well, because that mentorship relationship is a two-way street. Not only do we learn from a mentor, but guess what? That mentor learns from us. And if we really want to make a change in what the future looks like for our community, it starts with getting people outside of our community to learn more about us and to understand us more. And I think that that's a keen way of kind of being very versatile in how we look for mentorship. But unequivocally, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, and I know many other individuals that are part of the high-tech community, we feel a responsibility to make sure that we give our community the leg up, the push up, the pull up, and to make sure that we share our experiences for that very purpose. But just like we talk about diversity, diversify your mentors.
Absolutely. I think that's an excellent point. And I have another question I want to get to, and I know we're running out of time, but before I do that, Jamie or Lupe, anything you want to add to the mentorship question? No, we're good. All right. So let me move on. So this is the last question, unfortunately, because we're going to run out of time, but showing up with resilience, grit, and power every day takes a lot of energy, mentally, physically, and emotionally. I couldn't agree more. How and when do you rest and restore so that you can maintain momentum towards your personal and professional goals? Now, I know we're limited with time, but I must have all three of you say a few things around this, right? I think this is really a great question. So, Jamie, I'm going to start with you. We know it's draining. How do you recover? How do you pause?
What a great question. I pause by trying to get back to nature. I love getting back to nature. I love going on that hike. I love getting out to the beach. You can see my reminder of the beach here behind me. Just centering myself and seeing the beauty of the world, the bigger world around me. Having that helps me recenter, right? Spending quality time with my family and loved ones, right? Helps me sort of recenter myself. It's not easy to always remember to do that because again, we're go, 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 go. I love the tornado of love thing that you mentioned, Nellie. I aspire to being a tornado of love. Maybe I'm just a tornado right now. So that's what helps me sort of ground myself and helps me remember the bigger everything, right? Bigger than me, bigger than my day-to-day.
Love it, Jamie. Thank you. Lupe, over to you.
Yeah, I literally just had to do it. I was a tornado and I needed to center myself. I took 2 days off. Literally, I know I need 2 days off because I know the one day isn't going to cut it for me because the mind is still swirling. So it was that second day where I became at peace and have to get away. I just do. Meaning either in a spot in my home or I go out and walk. I'm an avid walker and I do it on my own. I absolutely need that alone time. So where do I find it? Sometimes it's at 11 o'clock at night, everybody. But I don't go to bed early, or sometimes it could be at 4:30 in the morning. If you want to get that tactical, that's exactly what I do.
Yeah. So you're intentional about it. You're disciplined to do it, and you're okay with doing something on your own, not feeling like you can't, do that, right? You take the time. Love that as well. Love getting back to nature. Myrna, take us home here with this last question, and I'm going to close. But over to you, Myrna.
Yeah, I just have to reiterate what's already been shared. I have a motto: work hard, play harder, because play is my recharge. Just like your phone needs to get plugged in. For me, spending time with friends, family, entertaining, doing those type of things is my ability to recharge. However, I will admit, it's been some time since I've unplugged. This has been a very difficult year. So I think the question and the responses from our panelists is going to inspire me to unplug next month and recharge my batteries. I do want to make one quick comment. The CEO also stands for the Chief Entertainment Officer. I learned that from the previous high-tech president. And when I unplug and play, I tend to be the CEO of entertainment. Last but not least, Angela Duckworth wrote a book on grit, and she talks about how hard it is to continue to show up with grit. I encourage you guys to take a look and take a read. She's not a Latina, but she is a minority, so there's a lot of things that have adjacencies to us.
Wonderful. Before I give you all three a big thank you, I just want to say two things. For those of you that are listening today and want to share your story, we want to collect those stories. So in the comments section, you will see an email for Susana Ramirez, who is a powerhouse within herself, and send your stories over to her, and High Tech will collect them and share. So before I say a big thank you to these powerful women, I want to share with you something that I heard last week, an event that I was leading as well. And I was interviewing an author of a book, and one of the lines in her book that stood out to me was that sometimes we are way too focused on the end. And if that's the case, we don't get past the beginning. So for those of you, and I probably didn't do a whole lot of justice to that line, but you get the essence of it, right? If there are plans you have and things you want to do, stop thinking about it from the perspective of the end, because otherwise you'll never get past the beginning. So as we think about what we all shared here today with Lupe, Jamie, and Myrna, I feel inspired by what I've heard. I feel a sense of connection by what I heard. I feel the energy, although we are virtual, I feel the energy of this panel. So I hope you have all felt that as well. It is about being authentic, using our platform, whatever that platform is. And Myrna was clear around that. It could be anything. It is about being courageous, as Lupe shared. It is with Jamie about believing in yourself. So with the 30 seconds I have left, thank you all for being part of this today, for choosing to be here with us. Myrna, Lupe, and Jamie, keep leading, keep sharing that energy, because we need you. And we are so proud of all three of you. So thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Take care.
With a bang.